Rent in Montgomery County has been a contentious issue for months now, with competing plans to try to grant relief to renters. Today, council is expected to vote on a plan that would limit rent increases.
Imagine for a moment that you have a friend, and that friend tells you that they have an amazing idea on how they themselves can acquire fantastical electromagnetic powers. And that idea is as follows. They decide that they are going to take a key that each and every one of us has in order to get into our homes, and they're going to stick that key into an outlet in their house with the circuit breaker turned on, and that will result in them acquiring these fantastical abilities. Now, you're a bit skeptical, so you ask your friend why they believe that this will actually work and why they think this won't result in their death, and they give you a bunch of cases of other people doing this, citing them as positive examples of this working, and then they tell you once they get those electromagnetic powers, they're going to use them in order to help society, and it's going to be absolutely brilliant, and you will enjoy it. But then you think to yourself, let me look up some of those names. Let me look up each and every one of those names, each and every one of those cases, to determine whether or not if the claims being made by your friend actually end up holding up to scrutiny. And what you ultimately find out is that every single one of those people mentioned by your friend died from this process. They died. They got killed doing this thing. None of them had electromagnetic powers. So then you rush over to your friend's house to stop him before he does this, and all of a sudden, yeah, he did it. He did it anyway. Why did he do it anyway and get the same exact results? Well, guess what? This is essentially the perfect analogy for rent control and rent stabilization policies, and we have yet another example of politicians shoving this key right into that freaking outlet, electrocuting themselves, and then wondering what the hell happened, even though, again, these are absolutely predictable consequences. This case is out of Montgomery County in Maryland. It's been an absolute disaster, and this is what we're going to talk about today, because all the same methods that was used to sell rent control in all the different other places, not just in the United States of America, but worldwide, were deployed in order to get this passed. It passed unanimously because politicians are absolute idiots, and guess what? The exact predicted consequences ended up coming to fruition. It's absolutely embarrassing, and now politicians are thinking, well, maybe we could tweak the law slightly in order to fix this problem that was created by them in the first place. This is what we're going to talk about today, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who didn't stick a key in the AC adapter and supports me over on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
That is correct. And just a few short hours ago, the Montgomery County Council unanimously approved regulations on how this law will be implemented. Advocates say this is good news for the county's renters.
So look, I'm a big supporter of the local news. In fact, it is very difficult for me to find out what is going on in the various local municipalities around this country without them. So in general, I am grateful to them. However, one of the things that I absolutely cannot stand about local news coverage of the rent control / stabilization issue is the fact that each and every time they talk about it as a victory for tenants, they have chyrons that are absolutely absurd in every possible way. And this local news segment is an exact example of what I'm talking about, because it says council to vote on anti-rent gouging bill today, because apparently the real issue in Montgomery County is not restrictive zoning, which is the issue, by the way, 99.9% of the time when it comes to actually having higher rental prices and higher housing prices. You're not building enough housing. That's the number one issue. Usually it's due to government regulations. It's actually all these landlords that are gouging people with rent. It's nothing to do with supply and demand. What even is that? Where have we seen any example of you actually increasing supply and rent dropping other than Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Houston, Florida, Nashville, Tennessee, and everywhere that doesn't have these stupid ass policies and actually allows you to build? Where else besides that have we actually seen that work? Oh, Minneapolis, it's worked there over there too when they actually cleaned up their zoning code. Nowhere. Obviously, it has to be the landlords gouging you. So of course, with this local news coverage and a bunch of tenant advocate groups, we ended up seeing this law pass unanimously.
Two of the biggest topics dominating the conversation at tonight's town hall: rent control and affordable housing.
We have a lot more work to do. We have affordable housing challenges and a housing crisis.
The council says over 130,000 households in Montgomery County struggle to make rent every month. They're working to produce over 31,000 low-cost housing units by 2030.
Now, of course, politicians say, hey, all the developers and the landlords and the property people that are just trying to lobby to not have this rent control law in place, they're fear-mongering. They're not telling the truth. In reality, what we're going to do is pass this rent control, but also we're going to approve more building. So we're going to get like 30,000 more affordable housing units on the market, and everything's going to be solved. This policy is definitely going to work because we're going to pair it with building more affordable housing, and that has never failed at any point in human history. And in fact, this is the exact promise that Zohran Mamdani has made, even though, again, it fails all the time, everywhere that it's been tried. We talk about comparing Minneapolis, which cleaned up their zoning code and didn't implement rent control, and you compare that to St. Paul, which actually did implement one of the strictest rent controls in the entire country. And what we saw was a mirror image of these twin cities, where property construction permits ended up going down 61% in St. Paul, while it rose 65% in Minneapolis, obviously showing us the direction on which way to go. But Montgomery County thinks that they've outsmarted everyone, and they're actually going to fix this. Now, of course, there are specific details in this particular policy that I want you to take note of after they ended up passing it unanimously and then developed the rules for it.
Please indicate by raising your hand. That is unanimous.
Montgomery County is moving forward on legislation almost a year in the making.
Really exciting moment. The community has been asking for this for years, actually.
Today, the county council took the final step in establishing laws to stabilize rent prices. Starting today, annual rent increases have a hard cap at 6%. An amendment also limits how much extra fines and fees property owners can charge.
So a couple of things are quite notable about the unanimous passage of these new rules. First and foremost, the woman that they interviewed has a horrible feminist haircut. She's wearing a mask along with another representative that's wearing a mask in July of 2024, indoors, again, still worried about COVID. And these are just the normal red flags that you know are going to be associated with bad public policy. But in addition to that, we hear about a hard 6% rent increase cap, and we also hear about limits to fines and fees, which again are very much consumer oriented and definitely 100% are not going to backfire. Obviously, this works all the time. Remember the key in the AC adapter and all the static shocks we got flying around as a result of that? It's definitely going to be aces all the way based on this policy. Trust me, this is why I'm doing the story, to show you the one time that they got rent control and rent stabilization correct in the entire history of the world.
Renters' rights advocates say this legislation is badly needed.
We have seen the consequences of lack of protection of renters who are experiencing a 10%, 15%, upwards of 25%, if not more, rent increases, right, annually.
However, the law does allow for exceptions. Currently, newly built properties and property owners who rent 2 or fewer units are exempt.
So right there we hear about the exceptions, and in the exceptions we hear that newly built properties for a period of time will actually be exempt, and in addition to that, properties with 2 units or fewer will also be exempt from these hard rent controls. So no big deal. They're thinking of all the things, and they're going to make sure this absolutely works. This is totally not going to create a system where you end up with more 2-family homes than any other kind of home when you're building up properties in order to increase supply in the rental market, thus undercutting the goal of 30,000 properties that they're promising to build in the other news segments. This is just going to work. And by the way, we can go back to our other local news segment where they interview a tenant advocate and they tell you, listen, it may trim down a little bit of development in Montgomery County, but the benefits so much definitely going to be worth it that this is going to be a 10 out of 10 policy. Trust us, we figured it out in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Meanwhile, though, developers and property owners who were opposed to this idea of capping rent increases, they say that there are many areas of critical growth within Montgomery County that could be jeopardized because of aggressive rent caps.
I think there might be a little bit of that, but I think if you look at the problem overall, that's less of a problem than people not being able to afford to live and be successful. And in order to do that, you really have to have an affordable place to live.
Now, I don't know if this Marian Jackson lady is an actual professional activist or she's just a regular, ordinary, dumb civilian, but if you hear that confidence right there, that it's not really going to affect the market all that much, and in reality, the real issue is people having a more affordable place to live, that's really what we need to focus on and what we need to fix. And honestly, if it trims down building just a little bit, it's going to be totally fine, but she could not be more wrong, and more wrong in an embarrassing way, because guess what? The drop in multifamily homes, this is homes with 3 units or above, was 96% immediately after the implementation of this rule. Now, when you look at this graphic, what you find out is that 582 units were being built in the lead up to the passage of this particular law. That has dropped to 23 units. But when you look at the chart, what you end up seeing is a complete collapse of multifamily building. As you can see, it was 1,240 permits issued in Q2 of 2024. Then in Q3, it was 313. And by the way, these rules were implemented in the middle of Q3. That's why you see the drop off there. But then in Q4, it's 8. Then Q1 of 2025, it's 7, then 23 in Q2, and then for year to date, it's 54. And by the way, for those of you who are curious, neighboring counties around Montgomery County saw construction increase in these very categories. The only thing that was different between those counties and Montgomery was, of course, the implementation of this rent control. Now, obviously, this is a disaster. You're never going to reach the number of units that you promised that you were going to reach prior to the passage of this bill. And the reason why is because you basically disincentivized new building. You also have problems with people leaving apartments because once you're in a rent controlled apartment, you never want to leave it. So no new inventory ends up becoming available. So everyone and anyone who's not lucky enough to get into one of these rent controlled units is going to actually be paying higher prices. I believe that studies have shown consistently that people who are not in these regulated units end up paying 25% higher minimum on average due to the fact that the regulated units exist and obviously supply is crushed on the other end, not to mention that a bunch of units that are not profitable end up being removed from the market because it's actually cheaper to not rent them if you're the property owner. And all of this could have been avoided if they just didn't do the thing that has failed each and every time that it's been tried. If they just decided to be smart, look at Austin, which by the way recently saw their rents drop to below pre-pandemic levels without any rent control, by the way, because it's banned at the statewide level, just by allowing more building, and you wouldn't be in this situation. But of course, you can never do anything logical. You have to follow the dumbest path possible. When your county board is full of people with half-shaved heads that are still wearing COVID masks in 2024, this is the results that you get. So Montgomery County, once again, another failure, another disaster due to rent control and rent stabilization. And again, this is yet another reminder to all the people who are pretending that Mamdani can somehow combine YIMBY policies with rent control, rent stabilization, that those things are inherently in conflict. They cannot work together. They cannot be done. And this is why housing prices will go up dramatically if Mamdani gets his rent freeze, and private sector building is very likely to go down, not up. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the madness in Maryland. Till next time.